Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome again to the program this evening, where we deal with a variety of social issues and the impact of these on our community. Thank you for those who joined last week as we started with the inaugural session. And we went through listening to legal experts, listening to a psychiatrist and a gender and development expert to build some narrative around the challenges that we're facing and around the subject gender based violence, which is becoming such a big thing across the different nations, whether you're talking about China, whether you're talking about the United Kingdom, Nigeria, South Africa, Zimbabwe. It continues to be such a major issue in many of the nations of the world. Now, this week, we continue from a slightly different perspective. We start to look at, we're getting a social researcher who's going to talk about her experience in the field, what she's seen as part of the research she has been doing in this area. And we're also going to be talking to someone who is a survivor and has now become um, a rape survivor advocate, helping people step out of this. And we would also be talking to a girls' rights activist and a psychologist, someone who works in the grassroots, who has the ears of the people who are impacted by this horrible, horrible, horrible situation. We also have someone joining us in that field. But before I read out the profile of our guests this evening, I want to encourage you all. We've got those who are in the virtual studio. I'll come to that in a minute. But please, wherever you are, do share the links. Let your friends know that we are live, and let them share the link. We're live on YouTube, Facebook. Please let them share the link. On that note, our first guest this evening, this is not in any particular order, but just building out the profile of our guests. We've got Oyidamola Falode, who is a seasoned management consultant, and she's done quite a lot of work in terms of research, understanding what the needs of the people are in the field. She's going to be joining us. We've also got Antonia Ojenag. Antonia is a survivor, like I mentioned before. And she will be sharing part of her experience on the program this evening. And we've got Mentle Nube, who is also an activist in this area. And I think it would be good for us to move over to Mentle and start the conversations with Mentle. Mentle, you're welcome to the program this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. I know last week there were a few issues that meant you couldn't really join us as you would have wanted to, but thank you for being available this evening to discuss this topic.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, before I bring it in the other guests, I want to ask a question mentally. How did you get into this field? What led you into the work you were doing in this area with girls who are going through a variety of issues? And if you can also
Mm.
talk to some of the work that you do in rural areas as well, that would be helpful for our viewers.
Okay. So I officially started this journey, as I would call it, the humanitarian world. It was in 2018 where I really felt like God was calling me to serve. And more than that, at the time, what had become so clear to me is understanding what financial freedom was. And I was very, very, very privileged at that age to understand the concept of being financially free, um, when I'm speaking about it in a religious term. And of course, many people, like I thought, okay, being financially free means that you have a lot of money and you have no limit and you're really rich and No, it wasn't the case for me. For me, financial freedom meant being free from your finances and being limited because of your finances. So I learned at that time what it was to be content in whatever state I was in, and that was a miracle. And through a conference that I'd live streamed at the time while I was in the UK, in my third year of psychology, this conference where this person was speaking so passionately about being free from, you know, that the world makes of I can't serve because I don't have, or I can't give my life because I have all these excuses. So it only happened then when I was freed that the seed for this organization was dropped. Now, I never, unlike other people, for my story, I never imagined myself in this field at all. So I always say this is why God literally called me at a time when he had to rake out all the um maybe ideas I had in life. I was really on about me getting rich and having money and making money from psychology and sitting down and being happy and living for myself, basically. But God had other plans. And so when he raked out completely that type of expectation, he then was able to entrust me with the seed. So it's not, I wouldn't say God just puts a seed like that just in anyone's hands, but I do feel like there's a preparation of the ground, just like a farmer. So for me, it had to be prepared. Everything had to be raked out, literally out of my life. I was literally brought to nothing. And I was just so genuine about wanting to serve. I didn't even mind where God was sending me. And at the time, God put down the seed of, or let me say, He was the one who sowed the seed of helping young girls. And at the time, it was almost like you would think it was a movie because everything was just so. It was almost like God had already thought of everything. The name in that the name is my actual second name. My name is Menhle Kanyangube, which means be the light. So my message to young women in that be a light was already set. You know, it's almost like from the day I was born, God had really called me for such a time. So the name is Kanya, be the light. And now my my main worry for young women was that you can invite them for church camps, but once they go back, especially because of their rural background, because of the cultural, let me say, narrative that they are currently confined in, it might be that they might really find God at the camps and their lives might turn around. But you can't just add a foundation to someone's life and say you've done enough. You need to now add the bricks. So I came in as the person who adds the bricks from whatever church camps they were coming in from. And that was 2018. And by the way, I was still in university. So if you're in university and you want to serve, don't be stopped. Don't be limited by your studies or don't be limited by your time because there's plenty. I always say that there's plenty time to serve in various ways. And I was far away. I was far away from home. While I was in the UK, and all I could do was work hard during my period break periods and literally save money to invest into whatever projects. So yeah, so 2018, and it just ended up building up into 5 service pillars. So we have 5 service pillars that I would like to introduce to you. So we have established our first one is Keep Our Girls in School initiative. So for me as a young woman, it's important that women are educated because it opens more doors for you as a young girl. And also it's you never know how God can use you as a young woman. When you limit yourself, you're limiting God. So I wanted to say, hey, listen, it doesn't matter how poor you were or what type of background you had, but if you're educated, you can actually turn around your community. You could be the first doctor, female doctor. You could be the first cardiologist. You could be the first you name it, even an HIV center, things that the world is now starting to appreciate, even a school, even a preschool. You could start something that the community doesn't have. And that was my main heart for Keep Our Girls in School initiative. So, and also now when I'm going into my second service pillar, because I'm sure some of you are asking what happens. Do you just recruit girls to go back to school? And for me, yes, of course, we do identify out of school youth, but I don't think it's enough just to pay for someone's school fees without teaching them how to be sustainable. So if I was not there in their lives in the next 2 years, I want them to continue going to school. So we have our second service pillar is Vukuzenzele initiative, which means get up and do yourself in our language. It's a very challenging, let me say, expression. It means that, listen, the time of women not knowing any skills, the time of women only being restricted to household duties and childbearing is over. There's more to us as women. There's more we can bring to our communities. So if it means we're the first entrepreneurs to do certain things, whether it's in solar, or whether it's buying and selling of food, or whether it's weaving baskets or hats, or creating beads or jewelry, whatever it is, it's basically saying, young girls, get up and do it yourself, be sustainable, learn skills that you could not do in another world. Of course, there are some young girls who are 15, 16, 17 in the urban areas who can't stand for themselves, but you have a chance to adopt such skills at a young age. And right now, as I speak, the young girls have gardening projects. They have they're weaving baskets. They are making beads out of recycled magazines. So very innovative things. We're not trying to teach them how to do things which are not within their environment. And we're also heading into livestock. So they've got cows, they've got chickens. These girls can run a proper cattle pen feeding business at a young age. Some people only learn this when they get to 25, 30, but they have the skills and the knowledge now. So they are really, I'm telling you, they are getting all the juice they can out of life from all the experts, from all the people who have gone out on field to implement some of these projects. So we know that, listen, even their university is paid for because we're teaching them how to invest now. We're not just saying, here's the money and use it all into school fees, but here learn how to manage your finances as young girls and how to invest so that later on you're not stuck asking for grants or asking for sponsorships, but you already have something you've made out of your time that you've invested. Okay, then the third one, I'm going to be quick so I don't take time.
Yeah.
Is girls' basic sanitary health. So, of course, this is an area that us women struggle with because you can just imagine the rural areas, there's not much education on menstrual health. So, our organization really emphasizes more on education. We are not so much geared towards giving out things or like charitable works. Of course, that's attached to the work naturally because we are dealing with vulnerable groups, but our main goal is always to educate. And when you can educate someone, they're able to pass on that knowledge to someone else who are struggling like they were. So with basic sanitary health, it's also speaking about diseases pertaining to women. So breast cancer, cervical cancer, a lot of traditional medicines, and even old fashioned methods that they use in the rural areas that are very high risk to health. So we are also kind of wrestling with some of these old traditional ways that have obviously caused a lot of health issues, as well as, of course, then giving them the sanitary way and underwear and everything else they need so that they can feel dignified. As young women, they can feel even down to toiletries. I am one person that if I can feel excited when I go to bath and feel fresh, I want the same for another young girl. And I want her to feel like, okay, I've now bathed, I'm now taking care of myself, I love my body in the right way, not in a not to be proud, or not to have that type of pride that you now should flash it around. But I'm just saying, the type of pride or the type of love that you have for your body to take care of it. We even teach them hygiene, how to take care of yourself, your hair, your nails, everything. It's literally a mentorship program for young girls. What they can't get at home, they're able to get at our program. They're able to ask questions. They're able to say, hey, I have had this problem. I need to speak to someone. I can't speak to my mom at home. I don't understand my body. I don't understand why it's changing like this. So that platform is given to them so that they can ask those questions. And then my favorite service pillar is abuse survivor psychological rehabilitation. So, of course, I am a psychologist, but I really do dwell on other psychologists and counselors and even sociologists who have come on the ground and who have shared their expertise and even just their love for people. Because it's not just about, I'll just say this briefly, it's being a psychologist is not a certification or a degree or a piece of paper. It's a heart. And when you're able to meet them where they're at and where they're able to feel your genuine connection with them, they're able to open up automatically. So our team is well experienced in that area and very much able to be the girls very be welcoming, acceptive, not in any way for them to feel like we are better or we know more or whatever, so that we come on their level and take them further from their abuse or trauma, whatever it is that they've suffered from.
All
Yes.
right. Thank
So
you.
that's yes, that's
Thank you
our
so much for those 5 pillars. You have packed so much in there.
mhm,
And
yes.
I have so many questions that have just come to my mind straight away from
Mhm,
what you said there. But before I go to those questions, and I'm sure that our studio audience would most likely have questions. But before I go to that, I want to move over to Antonia or Jenna, because you talked about working with rape survivors. She is a survivor as well, and she founded this organization called Tonia Bruised Not Broken Foundation. And Antonia, you are welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us this evening. I think you might be on mute. I cannot hear you. I'll come back to you in a second. Mentally, one quick question for you, because we've got some people here on the program who are researchers, university. Some are even probably doing their PhD in this area. And there's a
mhm,
question that came up last week that I want to put to you. And that question
yes.
is really this: you've talked about God and religion quite a bit in
Mhm,
what you said. Now, for
mhm,
someone who is on the outside of religion, some people have
mhm,
said, and this came up last week, that well,
mhm,
religion is actually a cover for perpetrating some of these things. Um,
mhm.
how do you feel? Have you come across that sort of narrative in the work you do in the grassroots? How do people handle religion and this kind of issues in the context of religion?
I would really like to answer that by saying, when you see it being um when you see such actions being clothed with religion, or I'll say religion, is because there's a lot of culture inside. Now, culture is already a religion on its own. Culture, it doesn't matter where you come from, but culture will always contradict the word of God. It will always contradict his heart for his people. It will always contradict love and what love is meant to be, because real love that comes from God does not hurt, it does not inflict pain, and there's no way that we can say there's religion and culture in the same room. And I know a lot of practices where they believe that, for example, I'll speak on marriage, where they believe that submission means that you are going to control a woman, or you're going to control your wife in a way of taking advantage of her rights. It could be in making decisions in the home. It could even just be abusive ways. So, for example, she will feel like she deserves to be beaten because she has to be submissive. So she's now having to pretend like she's a child under your hand, because she's meant to be submissive. And that's why I'm saying that when you now mix the two, there is a disaster, because it cannot. Culture on its own is a disaster. It will always break down the family structure. That's why there's a lot of breakdown in the home. Children don't know what real love is. Children don't know how to communicate. When children are abused at home and they have not learned what real love is, when they've not learned what God's love is, they end up going out there and inflicting pain on other kids. They end up bullying. They end up abusing other children. They end up not even knowing themselves, because if you see your father beating your mother, and that's the place of a man in the home structure, and he's telling you this is how a man does it, you will grow up thinking this is how I does it. That's a teaching from your father. That's a teaching from his father's father. It's a generational thing. That has nothing to do with religion. I think that's the best way I can answer it, because I know the word of God is very so contrary to what culture has inflicted. And I think that's, for me, someone who works on the ground, that is one monster that we're always having to fight, is the narrative of culture, and how they have really undermined the place of a woman. And even more than that, how they have suffocated the voice of a woman, where she completely acts like, has to pretend like she's an animal. Her rights are completely violated.
Let me come back to you on that point. You are unpacking quite a lot there. I think we've got Antonia back now on the
Okay.
platform.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me now? Hello? Hello, I need to know if you can hear me. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
Yes, we can hear you. You're welcome to the program this evening.
thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. It's an
Fantastic.
honor to be here.
Thank you so much. I know you've been listening behind the scenes to what's been going on. But before we go into some of the responses to what Mentally was talking about, do you want to share with us your journey and your story as we start to build a perspective for people to listen to, and then make up their minds on where they think this journey should go as we try to look for a solution? So do you just want to share your story, how you got into what you're doing today, and we'll bring you back into the studio to ask more questions on that.
Okay, so my name is Antonia Ojenagon. I came to Lagos to stay with my uncle in 1992. And one night, as I was sleeping, okay, I'm from a very religious home. I'm from a Christian family. So sex was never mentioned in our house. So I came to Lagos to live with an uncle. And one night, as I was sleeping, I felt a hand touch my breast, and the hand moved from my breast, it moved to my vagina, and that was how this started. So my uncle started abusing me. At first, I never knew it was my uncle, but one day, somebody just said to me, "Don't tell anybody what is going on in this house. I'll kill you." That day was when I was able to face to the monster who would come and abuse me every night. And sadly for me, it turned out to be my uncle, my favorite uncle, my father's brother, who I loved from childhood. And I think that was the most devastating experience of my life. That day was like the most devastating day, because I thought it was a monster that was abusing me, and the monster turned out to be my favorite uncle. So the abuse went on for some time until my friend invited me to a church, and the pastor of the church, I'd never seen him before. After he welcomed us as newcomers, he said to me that I had something to tell him, and I said I didn't have anything to tell him. And he just told me bluntly that I wanted to tell him that my uncle was sexually molesting me and I did not know what to do. Now, I never met this man before. That was my first time of meeting him. So he said to me, "Your uncle will come this night again, but do you want the abuse to stop?" And I said, "Yes, I want the abuse to stop." Then he said, "When your uncle comes this night, you're going to scream. You will scream like you have never screamed before, so that his wife and the children, everybody will wake up." Now, my uncle's wife never woke up throughout the period of the abuse, and I do not know why she never woke up. So that night, as my uncle came, immediately he raised my dress up like he would usually do. I began to scream. I screamed so hard that his wife woke up. And the pastor had told me that when the wife asked me what the problem was, that I should just pretend like I was having a nightmare because my father had died. Yeah, my father died at 46. So he said I should just pretend like because my dad had died, that I was having a nightmare, but I must scream until my uncle's wife wakes up, which was exactly what I did. So when my uncle's wife woke up that night, she asked me, "Oh, Antonia, what's the problem?" So I just said I was having a bad dream. And the following morning, my uncle looked at me from my head to my toe, and he hissed, he walked away. That was the end of the physical abuse, but by that time, the mental and emotional damage had been done. So I became a shadow of myself. Of course, child sexual abuse robs you of every sense of self-worth. It baptizes you with low self-esteem. You have zero self-esteem because you now begin to see yourself as worthless and valueless. At that point, getting married was the next thing on my mind because I did not. My family is a very small family, so I felt that if I left my uncle's house, probably I would have gone to be sleeping under the bridge, which I didn't want to happen. So, in my small mind, the only thing that could happen was to get married. Get married so you have a place to stay, which was the primary reason of trying to get married as at that time. So, every male figure who said as much as "I like you," I saw a husband in him. But as divine as God would have it, God Almighty would have it, I got married to a very supportive spouse, which has brought me to where I am today. The support of my spouse has been very, very instrumental to my healing because I was suicidal 2 times. I used to fall into severe bouts of depression. It got so bad in 2015. By the time I tried to commit suicide for the second time, I had to check myself into a mental health facility where I got help. Now, I never knew all this while I was growing up. We didn't really have information the way we have it now. We have so much information now, and I used to say, and I say to myself most of the time that if we had this kind of information, I'm sure that I would not have gone through keeping all that silence because nobody told us when I was growing up that you could scream, that you could run to an adult, that you could look for a trusted adult to tell what is going on. My uncle has said to me that my mother would not believe me if I told her. So now I'm happy we have so much information. So in 2015, I was checked into a mental home to get therapy and counseling. It was during that period it was discovered that I was suffering from the psychological effects of child sexual abuse, which I had not healed from, and that was what was affecting every strata of my life. So after I got the help that I needed, I never actually knew that you could seek professional help until I began to follow a psychiatrist online who started writing about seeking help for severe depression and suicidal thoughts. Anyway, by the time I came out of the mental home, I was treated. Um, I'm now a better person. Now I can tell my story and I'm not ashamed. That's why I'm able to tell you my story now because the fact still remains that shame, stigma, and judgment is still very real. We live in a very traditional and religious society, Nigeria, where you are being stigmatized once you come out to say that you've gone through sexual violence. In fact, a lot of people would not even want their children to have anything to do or marry somebody who has gone through sexual violence. My daughter was bullied when I began to speak. Someone told her daughter you couldn't be friends with my daughter again. So after I came back from the mental health home, it now occurred to me that, okay, you have a lot of adults like myself who have gone through child sexual abuse and they haven't healed. So that was the reason why I started the support group. It's a non-judgmental, a safe space for sexual violence survivors where you can come if you haven't spoken before. Is strictly for women. So you have women, sisters like you who have gone through what you have gone through, who will give you a shoulder to cry on. So we bring in therapists and counselors to come talk to us so that you can begin your journey to wellness. Because your journey to, if you don't heal from your pain can destroy you. So we always encourage survivors to heal. Start, you can get help. Help is available. So now we have a quarterly meeting which is called Living Purposefully Beyond Sexual Violence. It was a physical meeting before COVID came where we would women in the society who have made it to come and speak to the survivors, because a lot of survivors believe that once you have been raped or defiled or taken advantage or been molested or sexually assaulted as a woman, your life will never remain the same. So we bring women in society who have gone through this, who have broken through that barrier, who are now who are notable in their professions, to come speak to these ladies. So we've had the privilege of having Mrs. Nkwa, where she can come speak to the survivors there, tell us her own story. Now she's now the chairman of First Bank Nigeria. So now, 2020, we began to do interventions. We never used to do interventions before, but now we do interventions. So we work with the Domestic and Sexual Offences Response Team in Lagos State, and we work with FIDA, Federation of International Women Lawyers, because we need lawyers to work with us pro bono, because most of the survivors that we work with cannot afford to pay any afford to pay laws. So this is where we are now, right now.
Before I go, I bring Oyindamola and Mental back in. I'm going to put to you the same question I put to Mental earlier on, and that is this: you also talk about growing up in a Christian home, yet
Yes, please.
you've experienced this kind of thing. But in your journey of coming out, you're also talking about that same organization has provided some sort of support. What is your view on the role that religious organizations play in turning the narrative around in this area?
I think that the religious organizations should be encouraged to speak more about sexual violence. Now, we never used to hear any talk about sexual violence in church. While growing up, I never heard the pastor say anything about getting help when you are being raped. Even coming out boldly that you have gone through sexual violence was like a taboo. So, but now the narrative is changing now, because we have pastors who talk about it now. For instance, in my own denomination, in my own church, the wife of the senior pastor runs an NGO for sex survivors also. She runs an NGO, she writes books, inspire young children, to teach young children what to do, how to get help when they are sexually molested, when they are being groomed, what to do. Then we go about talking to parents so that they would know how to handle this just in case it happens, and the signs that parents should look out for. So now we have more religious organizations talk about it. Like I said, we're partnering with Lagos and with the Lagos State Domestic and Sexual Offences Team. Then we had a meeting just last month with religious organizations, both the Christian faith and the Muslim faith, where survivors were brought in to come and talk to them, to let them know that this thing is not just in the news, that this is not far-fetched. That look at the people who have gone through this, kind of experiences, and need to talk. Now, sexual abuse has no respect. It doesn't care if you are a Muslim or you are a Christian. It has no respect for religion. It can happen to anybody. It can happen to the child of a religious leader. It can happen to the child of anyone. It can happen to anybody. So we need to join hands together right now. Like in my church, it's no more a taboo to talk about it. We actually have a helpline. We have a number where survivors can call in and counselors will speak to them. So one of the things we did in 2019 was to go from church to church, telling them the importance of getting a department where you have professional counselors, because the truth will always remain that it is very difficult to talk about sexual violence. I can talk about it and not be ashamed because full backing of my spouse and my children. Like I said, my daughter was bullied, and my daughter was bullied in church where I shared my story, and someone said her child could not be friends with my daughter because my uncle used to abuse me when I was younger. So if I hadn't told my children my story, my daughter would have heard it from somebody in church, but I still got help in church. So I I just encourage the fact that pastors should talk about it unashamed, because the truth is we have a lot of people who have gone through this, who are in church, who can't come out boldly to say it because they don't want to be stigmatized. The truth is stigma is real. Stigma is real. I've had an archbishop say that you should be grateful to God you found a man who married you after what you've gone through. I think you should stop talking about this. My mother is a Christian leader, and my mother is not comfortable that I still have to talk about this. She says, okay, since we're Christians, you say you are forgiving. You are forgiving the perpetrator, who is your father's brother. Why don't you stop talking about it? Now, talking about it, I don't want another girl child to go to home. In this my journey, we have now found out that even the boy child is being sexually abused. And because we so the male to be strong, not to talk. A lot of men don't want to talk about it. So you have more women who have gone through child sexual abuse talking about it with damning the consequences. You have a lot of brave women who are saying that we belong to team no shame. You can't shame a shameless woman. Okay, so what? Through sexual violence, it's not the end of my life. There's more to me. So religious organizations too are beginning to talk about it. We have support group even in the Muslim communities. I can tell you that we have support group for Muslim women that talks basically about sexual violence and overcoming it.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Mental, let me come back to you on this point, because I think I'm seeing some common ground between what you are seeing and what Antonia is talking about. But there is a critical question that I want to put to you here. And that is this. I always get asked this question: when is justice served by the perpetrator? When do you get to a point where you say someone was a perpetrator, he's gone through whatever the law has said should be the response for this, and he's served his time effectively? What are you seeing from the grassroots work that you do? You talk about people who maybe have been raped, now they've got unwanted pregnancies, HIV, and all that. How do they address that? Can you speak to that point, Mental?
Okay. I'll just speak from where I'm working, as in the community. I'll first start by saying collaboration is very important, because in as much as you have a vision, you cannot build the house alone. You cannot, let me say, see all the end results without collaborating with the right people. So I'm talking about speaking with your local authorities, and also social welfare. If they're not informed, or if they're not aware of the work that you're trying to do, it could be very hard to work, because remember that the land or the people are of the government, and you have to work in collaboration with them at all times. And especially when it comes to such situations, they appreciate an extended hand, whether it is being an activist for gender-based violence, or education, or whatever it is. They're happy to have someone on the ground working and doing it effectively. But it's very important to work hand in hand with them. And so in such situations, I'm able to, because of the relationship that I have with them, to say, hey, I've gotten a phone call. There's a, I'll just speak from an experience that I had last year, November. While I was out there was a young girl who was being beaten. And by the way, gender-based violence is not limited to male and female. Sometimes it can be women and women in that, because it's a girl child. It's because the way that person has been taught the role of a woman, she's also passing on the same poison. So if she's taught that girls have no place in society, she will beat the next young girl that she's taking care of. So I have a lot of mothers who are very abusive as well, because they were abused either by their parents or by their partners, and now they're passing it on down or inflicting the same pain because they've never dealt with it. They've never been, given that awareness. They've never been educated. So in that instant, I had a young girl who was beaten. I'll just explain how she was beaten. She was beaten by a wooden stick, which is used for cooking. So she was beaten right on her forehead. So it's literally, you could see that she was beaten up. It was bruised, swollen. And this woman pulled out her braids. Some hair came out. It was bloody. She was beating her all over her body. She had big. It was just swollen. It was just ugly. I can't even speak about it much because it was very traumatic even for me, because I was on the ground at the time. And in that situation, I immediately saw something that alerted me to say, this is why it's gone on for generations and generations. Someone was sent, an elderly person was sent to go and mediate and see what's happening. Because obviously, when the community hears someone screaming their lungs out, they're going to be worried and think, okay, this lady started again. She might until she's dead this time. So this man was literally called to say, come quickly, come and see how she's doing, and come and see the situation. By the way, I'm speaking about a traditional man. He's not educated about gender-based violence. He's not educated about saying no to violence or anything of that sort. So when he got there, what really upset me was he spoke to the lady just to try and get her to apologize, as if to say that was the end of it, which was really upsetting for me, because I said, she's been apologizing the same manner for years and years. Will it get to the point where she's completely out of breath for you to finally see that you should have taken her out in the first place? So that is where young women a voice and gaining the strength, because now you're imagine I'm only 25 and I'm challenging someone who's 70 to say, listen, no, this cannot happen. You cannot go there and say, oh, the lady said it's I'm sorry, and then it's fine, and then everyone goes to bed. That poor girl is traumatized. She has no form of, are you okay, do you want to move away? I mean, I've never been violated physically, but obviously as a psychologist I can put myself in that abused person's mind, and just think of the way she's jumpy, the way she's paranoid, the way she's crying, the way she's even feeling suicidal, like, what is my life? I'm always beaten down like a dog, I'm not appreciated. And this lady would tell her things like, go and wake up actually, it wasn't her mother, sorry, it was her grandmother. So she would say stuff like, go and wake up your mother. If you want food, go wake up your mother by the grave. She was very, very abusive. So I couldn't understand how this elderly man, respected in the community, could go and liaise with an abusive mother or abusive grandmother, and it's okay. Closed case. Case closed. Couldn't understand it. And right there and then, I had to stand up and say, enough is enough. If they hear me today and say, there's a crazy 25-year-old girl who's come to shake up things and who's come to completely change our mindsets or change the way we do things, it's time for change. It is what it is. So from then on, collaborating with the social welfare, we have people who are well respected within that community who are able to go and assess, and they always take the side of the abused person, because they know from the proof around the community, from the proof on their body, there's no way they can fabricate lies. They are very passionate about the human, even their well-being. So immediately they step in and they help. But like I'm saying, it's very important to work. It cannot work. A community can never be independently, it can never thrive without collaboration. I might be great at girls'
Fantastic.
rights, but someone else might be great at on the legal side. As Antonio was speaking about collaborating with legal experts, so it's very important to have all of them on ground fighting for the rights of that person. And how much more power it is when you're able to collaborate, because as soon as we did that, it raised the standard in the community. Suddenly it was like, okay, this organization is got a lot of people behind us. It's not
Yeah.
connections, but it's just collaboration.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Mental. Now I'm going to bring in Oyindamola Falode. Like I said before, she's a researcher, done quite a lot of research in this area. And we're going to hear from her and her experience on how she got into this field as well. Oyindamola, you're welcome to the program this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you've been waiting quite a while in the back studio. Thank you for that. Do you want to share with us a little bit about your story and how you got into this area? I think you're on mute, Oyindamola. I can't hear you. Yeah, there's an unmute button right in front. Right in front, there's an unmute. I'll come back to you in a minute. Let me switch over to Antonia and just press a point a little bit more there, and then I'll come over to the studio audience there. Antonia, are you off mute now? All right, fantastic. Uh,
Yes.
quest, question for you, Antonia. You are a survivor.
Okay.
You've been through this process. Do you ever heal from this?
Yes. You can heal. You can heal. You heal and you get to a point where you can boldly talk about it, and it's not a big deal. You're not breaking down. 5 years ago, I would never have been able to sit here and tell you this story without breaking down. I was always breaking down when I have to tell the story. But after I went through therapy and counseling, I am now a better person. I'm still in the process of healing because you never forget. You just never forget. Every time I have to tell my story like this, I still remember, and I have the dates in my head. I remember the first day it happened, but I'm not in a place of pain like I used to be before because the pain all destroyed me. I held on to that pain. It was very valid because somebody violated me and I had every right to be upset. It was affecting me. It was affecting my health physically. I was hypertensive for years. I take blood pressure medication. I was not emotionally present at first because I had my children in quick succession. I was not emotionally present. My husband had to fill in the gap most of the time that I was not present. My husband was the one going for meetings. My husband was the one going to drop the children in school. My husband was the one going for open days in school because I would not feel like, sometimes I remember when the children were in preschool, sometimes the school was from home. The fact that I have to get up from my room to go and open the door because I had this feeling of worthlessness. But after going through this therapy and counseling and healing now, I'm in a better place now, like I said. I'm beginning to build intimate relationships with my children because it can affect every aspect of your life. Even having that relationship, I used to be a very paranoid mother, like very, very paranoid. But the paranoia has reduced to the barest minimum now. And are all teenagers now, so we can have conversations. We can talk about this. I used to apologize to them a lot when I just came back. You can imagine you wanting to go out. And because when I checked myself into the mental health home, my family didn't know about it. I had gotten to that point where I couldn't take it anymore. But I needed help, and I didn't want to die, but I needed to get help because of my children were growing up. I needed to be there for them. When I came back, If I have to go out, my daughter will say to me, "I hope you're not going to run away again." That was very, very heartbreaking. And I'll have to tell her, no, I'm not running away again. And I had to tell her the reason why I left the house without telling anybody where I was going to. I was ashamed of the fact that if people hear that I was checking myself into a mental health facility, here I was going to be stigmatized. And I didn't want my husband to be bullied because my husband works in the church. He works with the senior pastor of my church. I didn't want people to look at him and say, oh, that's the guy who got married to that crazy girl, because everybody knows him in church. And I didn't want my children to be bullied. I didn't want children to be laughed at that, oh, this children, their mother has mental health issues. So when I was going to check myself in, I deleted the psychiatrist's number. I didn't tell anybody. But it was for my own good, because now I'm a lot better. Like I say, see me telling you the story now, I'm not crying. I don't even feel bad about it, because I know that it's not a chapter in the chapters of my life. That's just one chapter. So you can heal, you can get better, you can have beautiful relationships. Yes, you can begin to build your life again. You can fulfill purpose, which is why we run the program I told you quarterly that says living purposefully beyond sexual violence. You can achieve greatness. We have mentors like Oprah Winfrey, whose story inspires so much, and we have Joyce Meyer, whose story also is very inspiring. These are people who have gone through sexual violence, but today they have made something out of their lives. So yes, you can heal. You can live a normal life again. That is why we advocate healing. Getting help is very important if you have gone through sexual violence.
Fantastic. Oyindamla, are you able to hear us now? Okay, we still cannot hear you. While you fix that, Mental, let me ask you this question here. Do you see a situation where once you're dealing with these people in the rural areas, what are they crying out for? What are they yearning for in those rural areas as a need?
Sorry, I'm trying to understand the question. You mean the young girls?
The young girls that you work with in the rural areas, what are they crying out for as a need? When you are interacting with them, what are they telling you? I wish I had this, I wish I had that. My life would be in a better place.
Okay. Companionship, someone who understands them, someone who can walk with them, someone who's not going to judge them, someone who's going to say, listen, it's okay, it's not embarrassing, whatever you have to tell me. I think there was a time last year where I had one of the most abused girls, and sometimes they are how do I say it? I don't know what type of abuse I can what category I'll put it under, but they are mentally, I'll say they're mentally abused to the point where I have seen young girls who walk around and they act like they're not humans. And when I actually sat down with them for counseling, it was the smallest thing that they wanted that they couldn't get, and that completely demoralized their world and their views and their perspective on life. And when I sat down with some of them, when I sat down with this little girl, she just said to me, "No one speaks to me about the menstruation cycle. My mom at home, she's very it's very taboo to speak about it. She'll just say, deal with it. I don't want to, I don't want to talk to you about it. Just deal with it yourself." So you find a lot of taboo topics that are not being dealt with. There's a huge bridge, I can say this, with parents and children. They can't speak about anything. They literally only speak about money for school fees, and that's it. So if you've had a bad day, if you have, if you have been traumatized, if you saw something, if you have been raped, if you've been beaten, if your teacher has molested you at school, if you've started your menstruation cycle, you have no one to speak to, no one to turn to. So when they have an opportunity for someone to say, "How are you?" It's like, wow, someone has finally asked me how I am. Someone finally cares about my well-being. When you're stepping into their world, they finally just relieve and release everything, and they just open up. That some of them are still learning how to trust. So emotionally, they might piece by piece. I think for the rural areas, they start to talk about their, let me say, physiological and external needs, and they'll tell you that this is really really what I need, this is really really what I want. But after a while of triggering more of whatever they're going through internally, because that's what I always promote and always push for. After a while, you start to see them speaking about certain abuses that they've gone through, or maybe topics that I've been speaking about, where they're like, you know what, when you spoke about this really touched me. I want to find out more, or I want you to explain more, or here's my situation, this is what I've gone through, or I didn't know I was living in abuse. I thought it was normal. Thing I'll speak about. I know gender-based violence is quite big. We can speak about it sexually or physically being assaulted. But one other one other challenge I have with culture, and this is why I say it's one of our biggest enemies. In my culture, if a and I hope I'm not diverting or taking up much of your time, but if your auntie is married, then when I mean auntie, I mean your father's sister. If she's married, her husband is basically your husband in my culture. And I think a long time ago, there would really it would be something serious where if your auntie couldn't have kids, you would have to step in as a sacrifice of some sort. Because I think it's really being a sacrifice. I don't think there's any point of even saying it's voluntarily, because literally you would have to sacrifice your life so that you could bear kids or bear children for her, on her behalf. So, of course, now with the way culture has somehow been exposed, it's not something that's being done a lot. However, you still have, because of remote areas where work, you still have a lot of uncles who will come in and say, hey, listen, remember that you're my wife technically. So obviously the breasts are perky, so they will play around the breasts, and before you know it, that man is sleeping with that young girl, and she is thinking, because this is because a cultural thing, it's normal to be with your auntie's husband. And even if you report it to her, it's probably something that she will conceal, or something that she will encourage, or something that she'll say, let's not tell anybody about it, as long as it's between you and this man. It's fine within the family. In fact, it's not even seen as a bad thing, even if it comes out, because technically you are the sacrifice. So you can just imagine how traumatic it is. So when you see young girls now in that setup where we're saying, hey, this is wrong, and say, oh, I didn't know that it was wrong for a man to touch my breast. Actually, my uncle has been doing the same thing and helped me. I think it was something that was wrong. So a lot of our challenges then are with the culture and bringing awareness to say this is wrong. And through that, our girls able to say, help me, this is what I'm dealing with. So they're able to open up, but they're only able to open up once once you share your intentions with them. That, listen, I'm just here for you. That's when they're able to share everything, to say, this is my most urgent problem at home right now. Not only do I need ABCD, but my uncle is doing ABCD to me as well.
Wow. Wow. What I would say here is, just before we go on, if there is anybody in the virtual studio audience who has a question to ask, please just point that out to me in the chat window, and we'll see if we can get you in to ask your question. Please do remember to mute yourself at the point when we ask you to, and to turn on the video so our viewers can see that. Oyindamola, are you able to hear me now? Yes, you can hear me. Oh, I'm so sorry. I think we are having some technical issues there, because I can't hear you. I can't hear you at all. But we'll come back to you. We'll come back to you in a second. Let me go right back to Antonia. Let me come to you on this next point. And this goes back to some of the stuff we've already touched on in terms of the trauma, the impact of what happens here. Antonia, in terms of this, the impact of this thing, um, you've talked to the fact that sometimes you've not really, you can deal with it differently now than earlier on. But my key question is this: for someone who is locked up in a home, doesn't know what to say, like you were at the time, what would you encourage that person to do? Antonia, did you hear that question? Mental, do you want to respond to that?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Do you want to respond to that?
All right.
For someone who is locked up in a home and is looking for a way out and is not really able to find that way out, what advice would you give to that kind of person?
I firstly say, if they were watching, if we are assuming that they're watching, the first place I would say you can go to is your local authority. If you're not comfortable with the police, because the environment of a police station can be quite intimidating, I would advise that you go to a hospital and you will be referred to a psychologist. Maybe if you are being sexually abused, they can check if maybe you've been violated, or if you're also being physically abused. There's someone there who can say, right, I can see marks, or this person has broken your virginity, or whatever it is. I can help you to get a police document, um, and take it here from there. I would personally think the route is going via a psychologist, because they do give a sense of warmth. So when you're there, you don't feel like you are a case number. Do you know what I mean? You're not feeling like you are a statistic. But when you're actually there at the hospital, you are able to be educated. You're then able to be assessed well. That's also physically. If you've been beaten up, the same thing I would say is go to a hospital, and then they can help you, maybe help you on your way to the police center. And also they can help relieve the psychological trauma immediately, because if it's not dealt with in the initial stages, you are at risk of bleeding internally, as I would call it, when you have suffered from a wound, whether it is one from sexual harassment, or physical, even mental, psychological, emotional, whatever it is, where someone has literally taken control and has taken your dignity away from you at that particular moment. It is very important, it's crucial to hide yourself in the hands of someone who can start to help you understand and accept what has happened in the past, so that you can create a world which you can move forward in. A lot of young girls that I work with live in a lot of self-denial. So sometimes you will think that this is normal, or maybe I can live with it, or maybe I can bear with it, or, just another punch, I'll be fine, I won't die, I've been fine all along. But you don't know what it's doing to you internally. So if you have not gone to look for that attention, that help immediately, you have a lot of risk from it, internal damage, psychologically. When you're now an adult and you have not dealt with it, it comes up in all other areas of your life, in the way you handle relationships, in the way you make decisions, in the way you even work with that certain gender. So if it's men who are inflicting pain, you have a problem with authority, you have a problem with a certain age of people, you just have a lot of triggers that are always around you, that are always going to push you, to remind you of the pain that you've been in, and you live in it without getting help. Whatever stage you're, I would say this boldly to you: don't feel condemned, don't feel like I'm alone in this thing. It's I have to carry it. It can become very addictive if you make it your own problem. It can become a very you can become obsessed with the fact that I have to deal with it on my own. And it's hard. I know it's very hard to leave it in someone's hands that you can trust. It's very hard to say, right, hi, I'm so and so, and I've I've gone through this for years and years. Can you help me? It is very hard, but that is the best step you can take. That is the next best place that you can be in, is in that doctor's office, and in that psychologist or psychiatrist, in the hospital, or in a center, a mental health center. And if you can, I would say go with someone that you trust. So someone who is a voice of reason in your life, someone you can say, this person, if I just tell them what has been going on, they will say, let's go now. And be very intentional about it, because your life matters, your health matters, your mindset, your well-being, it matters, and it comes first. So if you are not able to at least trust someone, at least make a move to go and to say, listen, today's my day, I need to start healing, you will stay there. And I'm praying that tonight, as watching and tuning in, that that person that is struggled with all kinds of abuse, and people that you have trusted, a lot of times people abused by family members, people that they trust, community workers, whoever it is who has more authority over you, can actually suffocate your own rights and make you feel like your existence depends on them making that move, or making those decisions, or someone who even uses money against you. If you are a young lady or woman, and you have no way of making an income, and you are being abused in your home by your husband, or if you're a young girl and you are being abused, and you've been told, listen, if you tell anyone, you're not going to school anymore, make the first step. You are not alone. You will find help. Make the first move. And if you cannot find help there, I would really say the next best step is to Google your nearest advocacy, or which are within the same area. They will be of much help, and they'll passionately help you. They'll take where you need to go when we're dealing with the legal side of things. But I would really say stick to someone who will also take care of your emotional and your psychological well-being, which is very important.
Can I ask a question here before I move to the others? What sort of
Yes.
support are you getting from the government in this particular area in Zimbabwe? I mean, you are farther away from the some who are dealing and addressing this in Nigeria, or even
Yes.
here in the United Kingdom. What sort of help are you getting from the government in Zimbabwe?
I think all I could say is I'm just getting the help from their resources there. So if it's the authorities, or if it's their healthcare, that's when we're able to collaborate. And also, for example, if, like I've said, if someone
Not small, big.
Antonio, can you hear me there?
Okay, I can hear you now.
Fantastic. I think we lost Mental there. Quick question for you. What kind of help are you
Okay.
getting from the government in Nigeria? And then we'll contrast that to the kind of help we're getting from Zimbabwe.
Okay. I live in Lagos State, Nigeria, and the Lagos State government has zero tolerance for any form of gender-based violence. So the kind of help we get from them is the fact that there's a response team in Lagos State. It's called the Domestic and Sexual Offences Response Team, where you can call at the tip of your finger and you will get survival. And anybody who is going through any form of GBV will get help. So there's an office of the public defender (OPD) where they will give you a lawyer pro bono if you don't to help survivors of any form of GBV, and justice. We're getting prosecution is happening now. We're in court 2 weeks ago, and we didn't have to pay for anything. We collaborate also with the police. So in Lagos State right now, we have what is called the successfully submit in different police stations, and you have what is the gender desk, officers of the police who have been trained on how to handle GBV cases. So when you go to these designated police stations, immediately you say that you want to register a case of domestic or sexual offense, you are not told to go back. Now, even the law enforcement agencies are now knowing that GBV is not tolerated and it's no longer a family matter. It is now a crime. So the help we're getting from the government is also creating an awareness. They also have a code where people can call, a toll-free line where you can just call, just give the address of where you are. You don't have to say your name and you will get help immediately. So people are beginning to realize now that you cannot just try anything just the way we used to before. Sexual assault referral centers in different states of the Federation. We have 3 in Lagos State where sexual violence can be reported at any point in time. Because if you go to a private-owned medical facility, the police will not accept the report. So you can now walk into any government-owned primary healthcare facility or the sexual assault referral centers. We have them in different states of the Federation, you know. So right now, if we remember, sometime last year, when COVID hit, because COVID actually brought out a lot. It became like an epidemic, a pandemic in an epidemic in a pandemic, because it now showed that a lot of people were stuck at home with their abusers. So we had more cases. For instance, in Anambra State, we had 80 cases of reported father-daughter sexual abuse, which is incest. Wow. In Anambra State alone. And the police came out to say that they had 703 official cases reported to them. You know, even the Ministry of Women Affairs collaborated that number. Those were the numbers that were officially reported. So the president had to set up a committee, and Governor Fayemi of Ekiti State had to declare a state of emergency on sexual and gender based violence, because it was really terrible, you know. So the government is beginning to realize that, oh, okay, we need to begin to do a lot. This is beginning to go out of hand. So now families are also beginning to realize now that you don't treat any form of GBV as a family issue. The perpetrator has to pay for it. And especially if it is a child that is involved. Right now, because the VAP Act, Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, have been passed in some states have domesticated it, some states haven't domesticated it. But the states where it has been domesticated, now you now realize the age of consent is 18. So you know that a child that is below the age of 18 cannot give consent for sex. So now we now also know that the sex offenders register has been opened by NAPTIP. So anybody who is convicted of any sexual offense, the person's name is not automatically registered in the sex offenders register. So I think that right now the government is doing a lot. Then people now know that if you cry to the government, they would answer, they would respond, you know. So we have different initiatives. Like today we had a meeting before I came for this meeting, I had attended another Zoom meeting with the Minister of Women Affairs. You know, they were also talking about gender-based violence. So now you can agree with me that gender violence of any form, violence against women and girls of any form, is beginning to take the front line, and we're beginning to see convicted cases. We're beginning to see convictions. I was in court 2 weeks ago because one of my survivors had to go to court. You know, so I told you that I said at the initial stage that we now do interventions. So we follow them. We're giving 2 lawyers, you know, and we had representatives from the Lagos State government who came just to give moral support to the survivor also. So I think that I will applaud the government that for the first time, I think the government is really trying its best to see that any form of GBV is called.
Fantastic. Thank you. Let me just try this again. Oyindamola, I'm so sorry for the technical issues that we're experiencing here. Something that we'll need to look into. But can we see if we can hear your contribution? I would really like to take that. No. No. So that there is a button let's just give this a try. There is a button on your screen that looks like a microphone. Can you tap on that for me? Let's just you know what I'll do, Oindamola. I'm so sorry about this. What we'll do, that the two of you, I really need to hear what they want to say. What I will do is next week, if this would work for you, we'll bring you back on the program and we can have a fuller time with you to share what you have to say about the program. I'm so sorry about this issue you're experiencing there. But next week, I'll bring you back on the program and we can talk a little bit more about the research that you do. We would really love to hear about your research, what you've seen in the field doing this kind of work, and even more specifically, and I think that given the time we have left, I may want to talk to Mental and Antonia on this. Is what kind of support do we have for people like you who are interacting with this thing on an almost a daily basis? How are you protecting yourself from the trauma of listening to the stories of people who go through this kind of problems? There was a report from Facebook, I think it was, where they had done this analysis, and they found out that a lot of their staff who are curating all the gory videos that people post on Facebook, and also YouTube was in the same boat actually. They started to develop psychological issues as well. So, Mental, as a psychologist, what do you say to that point as a psychologist?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Mental. We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Um, I think it's really important that you are aware of the emotional, I would say, the emotional baggage that you carry yourself, because remember that my work is very much personal. So when I'm on the ground, I can easily become attached to the girls, and so you end up taking up the mothering, role of being in their lives, and even the sister role. And so when any one of your little sisters is saying, help me now, I'm going through this, or I've just been beaten, or even had a case where one of the girls came to a workshop with like her flesh was out on her foot because her mother took a very hot and burning piece of log, which obviously was full of ash and everything, and she threw it at her, and it immediately burnt off flesh. So it was very much alive, and she hadn't received any form of medical attention for it. So just to see that, it breaks you. And so the only way you can really take care of yourself, especially as a psychologist, is to sit down and self-evaluate and really reflect on it. I have never, of course, I do have nights where you struggle to sleep until you have sorted something out, or until you have phoned this person and phoned that person. But I have learned that when it's time to de-stress, and until I have done everything I can, I have to make sure that on that day when I've heard that this young girl has been abused, I can only do what I can do. After that is beyond my control. And I've had to learn the discipline of saying, right now it's time for you to rest, otherwise you won't be able to help. So if, for example, I need to call out
Mental,
a
can I
police
check
officer
something
to
there,
go
please?
assess, or in the meantime to get her into a different home for her safety. Right.
Can I check something there, mental? Did you say that you sometimes have nightmares?
No, no, no. Hello, can you hear me?
Go ahead, we can hear you.
Hello?
We can hear you, mental. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm so sorry. The dogs are barking in the background. No, I was saying sometimes you can actually have some sleepless nights because you're worried that a certain case is not being dealt with. But you have to make sure that you have to take temporary measures to make sure that that young lady is safe. So for me, I have to make sure that she's either in a different home or that the police are on top of it. Of course, you have to alert them immediately, but for them to go out there and assess. And also where I help these girls is quite remote. So sometimes the nearest, let me say, the most reliable police or even social welfare um, officer that I can find is literally 2 hours away. So I have to literally now make a plan of how they can get down there to assess. And if that can't be done immediately, then I have to rely on my support system, on the people that are on ground to say, listen, take this girl and put her there. Already the social welfare has been alerted. So I do have the right to remove this child out of their home. The documentation will come the next day to certify that. But until that authority, there's nothing I can do. So I have to get the authority of the social welfare to say, can I remove this girl immediately? She's being abused right now. And they say, yes, tomorrow morning we'll assess, we'll see what her wounds are, we'll get a hospital assessment to see where she's hurt, what evidence we have that she's been hurt, etc. And at least I know that, okay, when I'm going to bed, it's been sorted out. If it's in the middle of the night, you have to attend to it. And once you have dealt with it and told the necessary people, and it's also important when you're doing this work to have support system, people that are on the ground that you can say, right, wake up also, get to this place now, do this ABCD for me, and they're able to help you so that you can be, let me say, eased in your mind that, okay, at least she's sleeping somewhere where it's safe, or at least the police are onto it, or at least one of my volunteers or groundsmen or whoever it is on the ground are helping me to solve the necessary, to solve the issues now. But I think the biggest issue that you can have as someone who's in the space is to do it all alone, to be the solution by yourself. And I'm so grateful that I do also have collaborations with Justice for Children here in Zimbabwe. So if at all I need some help or I can't understand something, they're able to give me legal advice to say, don't worry, give me the name, give me this thing, and I'll call and I'll do this, etc. At least I have someone I can then call and say, please help me at this moment. But the beauty of having a circle of partners who can help you is that when you have such situations happening, you don't have to deal with it all by yourself. And you're able to then get help faster. Because imagine if I was just by myself and now having to talk with this person, talk person on my own, that little girl or that young girl would be struggling to get help immediately. So when I have dealt with calling the necessary people, I'm then able to go to bed knowing that we have saved. I think the most important thing to me is knowing that we have saved, or we have done our part. And
Fantastic.
when we're able to then sit down and realize that we have done our part and we've done all we can for now, we will do the rest later on in the week or whatever it is. I have to then discipline myself to say, now it's time to rest. And also the power of praying. Because I always say a person is not made up of psychology only, the psychological aspects. They're not made up of the physical aspect, but they're also made up of the spiritual. And for me, I'll just speak from a Christian perspective. I'm so privileged to really rely on the verse that speaks of casting your burdens, because sometimes it can become too much, but to trust that really God is taking care. If that young girl was brought on my track, God has a reason and God has a plan for her life. And that's something that is greater than my. And when I rely on that, I'm telling you, the power of knowing that there is someone up there who's taking care and defending all your battles, it is, honestly speaking, the best thing ever. When you're now on ground and they're seeing you there on ninja mode and they're thinking, how are you doing it all at once? It's because your spirit man is taken care of. It's because you are not sleeping burdened, because what keeps you awake is not just your mind or your psychological thoughts, but it's spirit. When your spirit is not well, you go to bed feeling heavy laden. You can't even sleep. You're restless. You're having bad thoughts. You're having bad nightmares. But when all three come together, you're taking care of your physical, you're eating right, you're sleeping with enough hours, and you're taking care of your mind, knowing, okay, I've done enough, I've done what I can do. Now it's time to detach, de-stress, take care of myself so that I'm effective for the next day. And praying, taking care of your spirit man, and also submitting them in the hands of God. There
Yeah,
is no way that you can crumble on this journey. I'm most positive
fantastic.
about that.
Thank you so much for that. Antonia, let me end this evening with you on this point. We've talked a lot about the girl child. We've talked about the woman as the victims. Um, you highlighted briefly in your submission earlier that you're starting to see male children also impacted by this thing. Can you speak to that a little bit as you walk us out in the last 2 minutes or so?
Okay. When I started my support group, it was just for women. So I began to get inbox messages saying, why are you focusing on the girls? Men also get abused. So I started reading up on it, and I began to meet male survivors. So I had friends who would come up and say, oh, I was also sexually abused. And some of them actually are very vocal about it. So on one of the occasions when I was thinking, okay, what next to do, we had a support group meeting which was strictly for men because of the number of inbox messages I was getting on social media. So we had a meeting that was only for men, and I was the only woman that came that day. All the speakers were men, and I was the only lady because I was the convener of that event. But as the event started, a man said that he was going to share his story of sexual abuse, but I promised them that he was men only, and that I'm a woman. So I kept saying that I'm convener of this event, and he insisted that I have to step out so that they will be able to share his story without any shame and all that. So that day, that day we had like 23 men come, and almost all of them had been sexually abused when they were children from the age of 5, 6, 7. And sadly, the perpetrators were mostly women, which is a very sad truth.
Wow.
A lot of yes, a lot of the young boys who I have spoken to, a lot of the men who were abused as children were molested mostly by women,
Wow.
aunties, mother's friends. Yes, it's a sad reality, but that's what we found out. That some of them were also molested by men. I was able to force my spouse to come for that meeting. And my husband was like, is this what you listen to every day? Because the meeting was supposed to end for 8 o'clock. And by 8 p.m., they were still there. After the general, they wanted a one-on-one counseling because we had a pastor and 2 coaches who came. One of them is also a survivor, Barrister Kilami, who speaks vocally about his own experience. So he was also there to offer moral support. So now it's been an amazing journey, if I can say that. But the truth is, someone who is hurting will hurt another person. What we found out is most of these perpetrators are also people who are hurting themselves. They were hurt when they were growing up, they are hurting themselves. Like, I remember when I shared my story in church and my pastor had to make an altar call, a lot of people came and pastor was so shocked that, oh, you mean all those people have gone through abuse. There was a particular guy who came out that he was molested by several women when he was growing up. Now, this guy beats his wife. He will beat her. Sometimes, I remember one time I was in the hospital, he had beaten the wife and broken her legs, and she was also in the same hospital where I was. You know, it was later we now found out that when someone spoke to him, he now confided in that one that he gets these triggers whenever he sees women because he was serially molested by women when he was young. So it's like taking his own pound of flesh. Now he has power and he has control. You know, exerting that on vulnerable women who don't have power, because when he was vulnerable as a child, somebody took advantage of him. So his own way of paying back that gender that took advantage of him was to be his own spouse, you know. And
Wow.
it's, yeah, so we have more people like that. So for the men, we also encourage them to go for counseling. Thank God in Nigeria, where I live now, we're beginning to be open to we're beginning to be open to the fact that seeing a therapist is not a big deal. That everybody should see a therapist. That if you go and see a therapist, it's not a bad thing. Then as a Christian girl, we're beginning to shed more light and advocate more of the fact that because you are a Christian and you see a therapist, it's not a sin. It doesn't make you less of a Christian. It doesn't make you less human. Then we're telling the men it's okay to be vulnerable. You know, a lot of men have been socialized to believe that when you are a man, you man up. And I would never understand what that statement means, to man up. Manning up means we're telling them to mask their pain. Manning up means we're telling them that you're not human. But you see, before you are a man, you are a human being and you have feelings. It's not a big deal for a man to say, oh, I'm going through this, right? Men also have feelings, you know, they're not made of steel. They're not made from wood. They're also human beings and they have blood flowing in their vein. So we're beginning to say that do not talk down on a man when a man says he has been molested. Because the truth is, if you see comments on social media when a guy comes out to say he's been molested, a lot of people make jest of them. A lot of people laugh at them. A lot of people make snide remarks like, are you going to say you did not enjoy it or not? But no, he has feelings. He was taken advantage of, and he has a right. He's also hurting, and he has a right to also go through the process of healing so that he can become a better person. You know, I haven't done any research. This is just my own personal opinion. I believe that most of the cases of domestic violence that we have, most of the cases, a lot of these men are hurting, and the only way they can exert authority and show control is to use their fists on their spouses. You know, sometimes you see the way a batters his wife and you're wondering, this woman has children for you. You say how can you even beat somebody you love? You know, I had a situation where one of my survivors was beaten by her husband and he said to her, if I can't have you, no one else will. And he bites off her lip. You know, yes, yeah, almost half of it. Wow. You know, and he went to the Lagos. Yes, he went to the Ministry of Justice. Before we got there, he went to report himself, and he just kept saying, "I need help. I need help." So what we do now is we're not throwing the bathwater and the baby away. We get therapists. If you're open to therapy and to counseling, we will get therapy for you so that you too can become a better person to society. Because the truth is, we have so many wounded men who haven't had the opportunity to heal. And when you go to church, they're hammering something on your head. You are a man, you are a man, you are a man. Nobody's saying that you are human. It's okay to hurt. You know, you can start the journey to wellness. It's okay to speak to a therapist. When you're sick, you go to the hospital. So when you are mentally, when you are emotionally not okay, when you're emotionally sick, you should speak to a therapist. You speaking to a therapist and getting help is like you going to the hospital when you have malaria and you have to talk to a medical doctor. So we need to, you know, we need to keep talking about it. We need to keep advocating about it. That for you to be a man, you are also a human being. There's no big deal in getting help. And when a man speaks out about his vulnerability, we should not throw him down. We should not kill him the more. We should lend a helping hand, lend a supportive shoulder. And I think that more men should come out, start supporting groups for men. because I tried to do it. I had up because the men would say to me that I would rather speak to a man. Just the way as a female survivor, I would rather speak to a female survivor. I would rather speak to a female therapist than go to speak to a male. Although some people don't mind, but some people do mind,
Yeah.
So we need to, yes, we need to keep lending a lot of support to our men. Together, we will heal together so that everybody will be emotionally and mentally well for a better society.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Next week, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the researchers that we couldn't get in today, bring them next week.
Okay.
And this is for our viewers. And I would also, there's also Dr. Uwana Samuel in the audience who wants to say something. I think he's also done quite a bit of research because you've led us down, both of you have led us down quite an interesting path here as you've talked about your experiences, and it will be good to bring all the research to the table and let's see what the research is telling us. So I want to thank you both so much for being here tonight. For I know it's very late in Zimbabwe now. Thank you so much, Mental, for your being here. And Antonia, thank you. Keep up the good work with the work you're doing. It's just amazing hearing all these stories. And I wish you all the best. And with all this media advocacy that we're doing, I hope that we would start to bring these ideas to the fore and we can address these issues better. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. And to our studio audience, also thank you so much for those who have been there. We really appreciate your time this evening. And thank you. We will meet again next week. Thank you all for joining us this evening. I hope you also found that quite helpful. What we're going to do tomorrow, like you just had me say there, next week, sorry, like you had me say there, we're going to get the researchers around the table and let them talk about what the research is telling them, what the data is telling them, and we will build on from there. But just before you leave, for those who may be on Facebook, YouTube, like, follow, subscribe, share this information out, let people know what's going on so we can deal with this issue right at the crux of it, and hopefully we'll start to contribute our own quota. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. See you next week.